Hey friends, here we are. Here's my 2018-19 winter outlook. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going to happen this winter, or at least what I think is going to happen this winter. Before I do that, though, I just want to thank everybody for being a part of the weather page. I really appreciate it. I've always loved winter storms, as far back as the early 80s, even the 70s, and as fun as it is, it's really getting even more fun with so many people asking questions and being a part of it. So thanks so much for that. Really, if you have a hobby like this, it's nice to be able to share it. So thank you so much. Get into it. What I looked at to see what's going to happen this winter. First of all, there's some factors I'm going to talk about as far as what is going on this year already. And we're going to talk about teleconnections. You'll see what those are in a little bit. I'll explain those in detail. The next thing is winter patterns of this year. Atmospheric memory. This year we had a lot of humidity. We had a lot of rain. It was very wet. We had even some snow in March. So there's been a lot of liquid around over the last year. So we'll take a look at what the pattern is up to this point. Analogs. One way that people make their winter outlooks is to take a look at past years and to see what other winters that had similar setups look like. And I do have some of those. But with that said, I don't see any analog that really is 100% like this year. No two winters are the same, but this one's kind of unique. And when we look at the teleconnections, you're going to see why I think that. Other opinions. I've told you this before. If you've been with me for a while, there's no doubt that part of what I put out as a winter outlook takes into consideration what a lot of the experts think. I certainly look at a lot of different winter outlooks before I put mine out. And I think that's important to do. It's just like a doctor. You may make a diagnosis, but you want to run it by somebody else to make sure that you're seeing what they're seeing. So that is a big part of it. And I'll show you some other opinions that I weighed. And so there's even more that I didn't even put in the presentation. Monthly snow amounts and temps. I'm going to break down our snow amounts month by month and also what the temperatures are going to be each month. If you like snow and cold, you're going to be happy about this one. Snow totals. I'll put in snow totals at the end, show you the snow totals for the Jersey Shore, for the Philadelphia area, for the north and west suburbs, and the Poconos. On here, teleconnections, El Nino. So this year there is a building El Nino. It's not going to be super strong like it was in 1997-98. If you're a winter fan, you'll remember that is the worst winter we've ever had here. I think it was the warmest winter on record in Philadelphia. We got less than an inch of snow that entire winter, so it was pretty bad. So this time it's not going to be as strong. It's going to be mild to moderate. It's also going to be central based. It's called the Modoki El Nino, and that is a colder El Nino. If it were more eastern based, then we would be looking at possibly warmer than normal conditions. But in this case, it's a Modoki El Nino, so that's going to change things a little bit. The El Nino setup also really fuels the subtropical jet, and that's fuel for storms. It really does give it a lot of energy to work with. So we're going to have a very wet pattern along with cold, and I think you know what that will lead to. The PNA, it puts a ridge in the west. If you think of a hose, if you had a hose that stretched from California to the East Coast, maybe New York, and then you decided you wanted the hose in the area of California, you wanted to kind of push that hose up and make a hump. Well, by you pushing the hose up on that left side of the hose, it's going to cause the right side of the hose to dip, and that's what's going to happen with a positive PNA. It's going to put a ridge in the west and make a trough in the east, and when you have a trough in the east in the wintertime, it allows Arctic air to come racing in, so that's another sign that it will be a cold winter. The EPO and WPO, I put them together. They're going to trend negative for the winter. This puts a ridge over Alaska, and that, again, allows cold air to be pushed down from Alaska and Western Canada, and it drops into the United States and heads east. The PDO. The PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, it's positive right now. It usually is positive or negative for a very long time. It usually is about 20 or 30 years before it switches. It was only a few years ago that the PDO did switch from negative to positive, and it looks like it'll still be that way here. What it will allow is a warm pool of water to be I should say warm pool of air to be around Alaska. And when that warm air is in Alaska, it'll discharge polar air, obviously cold air, to the south. And if it works in conjunction with El Nino, that really can make things very interesting for winter time. The QBO trending positive this year. I mentioned here sudden, let me say that again. Sudden stratospheric warming events. It looks like there's a major warming of the stratosphere right now heading into December. So December should start out cold. And you might say, well, why? Well, when the stratosphere does warm and it weakens the polar vortex can become dislodged and sink. So the weaker it gets, it starts to sag, and when it sags, it's sagging down into the United States. You might remember 2013-14, we had extremely cold air, and some of you might have said, you know, what's a polar vortex? Never heard of it before. That became a big talking point, that the polar vortex is making an entrance into the United States. Well, that was because we had sudden stratospheric warming events. The polar vortex, as I said, when it gets weaker, it sags. It could also split in two. And if it splits in half, that's another point to talk about, because that's going to let us know the cold air is going to be coming into the area. So it does allow for Arctic intrusions throughout the winter time. The NAO, North American Oscillation, when it is negative, it will allow cold air to filter in from Canada. So we have blocking up near Greenland with a negative NAO. And it will also slow down the storm track, and it allows the storms to be prolonged. If you remember last year, the storms that we had, especially in March, I think we had 3 nor'easters in March, which was amazing. Record snowfall for Philadelphia in March. But if you remember those storms, one thing about them was they didn't last all that long. They did come up the coast, but they did not stall. They did not take a long time to make their way north. So that was because the NAO was positive. And really, over the last few winters, we've been stuck with a positive NAO for the most part. So this year, it looks like it's going to fluctuate, but it will probably be more negative. And the fact that it will fluctuate kind of gives me pause, because I'll tell you something. A lot of our big snowstorms, the 30-inch storm that we had in 1996, the President's Day storm in 2003, the snowstorm that we had, the blizzard of 1983, all of those storms, if I remember correctly, had negative NAO. The signal was a negative NAO, and it was trending positive. And when you see that happen, a lot of times that's when major storms can come up the coast. So the NAO, if it's negative and starts to trend towards the positive side, that's when you really have to be on the lookout for a heavy snowstorm and potential blizzard. So I think it's going to fluctuate this year. It'll be more negative than positive. One thing that can happen if you like snow that will disappoint you is if the NAO goes too far negative, it can suppress the storm track. So storms could come up the coast, but then when they get around maybe up to DC, they start to hook right and go right out to sea. So if you're in New England, if you're in New York, if you're in the Philadelphia area, you don't want to see a very negative NAO. I think this year we won't have to worry too much about it, because with the very strong subtropical jet, those storms should have enough juice and enough energy to start making their way up the coast. Some more Can you believe it? There's more teleconnections here. The Arctic Oscillation, again, like the NAO, I think it's going to fluctuate between negative and positive. Eurasian snowfall this year in October was very low. I don't know if it was record low, but it was very low. And then all of a sudden, as November started, the snow cover in Eurasia grew dramatically. When you have a lot of fall snow cover in that area, it will help to turn the AO, the Arctic Oscillation, negative. And when the Arctic Oscillation is negative, you start to get more Arctic intrusions, especially along the East Coast. The MJO, that is enhanced convection over the Western Pacific and Western Hemisphere. You really cannot predict that more than 2 weeks out. It's virtually impossible to do that. If you want a storm along the East Coast, you want the MJO to be in the 7, 8, or 1 phase. Those are the phases that will be decent predictors that there could be East Coast, strong storms along the East Coast. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But that one you can't really tell for certain. Mentioned this already. October Eurasian snowfall was really low, but November saw it really ramp up. So we do have snow cover. Fall Eurasian snow is usually a predictor of a very good snowy situation along the East Coast. If you're a snow fan, that makes you happy. If you don't like snow, that makes you unhappy. But that one's kind of a mixed bag because, like I said, October wasn't as snowy as you want it to be, and but November ramped up. So we'll see what happens with that. Solar minimum, you might have heard about this. There have been some articles about it. Sunspot activity is very, very low right now. We are in a solar minimum, and it's extreme, actually. Some days have 0 sunspots. This is not very well known how much this plays in, but there seems to be a correlation between very cold winters and low sunspot activity. So I put it in here. There's more research that needs to be done on this, but certainly something to take into consideration. The weather of 2018, the patterns that we saw. One, it was very humid, extremely humid. I don't know if we set a record for days with over 70% humidity or a dew point of 70 degrees, but my gut feeling is it was pretty close to a record, if not a record. Very stormy. We already have, I think, the #1 wettest year on record in 2018. We had tremendous amounts of rain over the summer, and even if you want to go back into March, we had 3 nor'easters that dropped snow, ice, and rain. So it's been extremely stormy, and the atmosphere has a memory. The atmosphere has a memory. It really remembers what it did before. You might remember a couple years ago, there were snowstorms that were off the East Coast, and they hit Boston over and over and over again. And you may hear meteorologists say it's going to snow where it likes to snow. So I think because we've seen so much storminess along the East Coast, I don't see why that pattern would change a whole lot as we go into the winter. Analogs. Now these I did not come up with myself. These are from WPVI. You'll see that as I pull them up here. Let me just pull them all up. So I saw these. Cecily Tynan put up her winter weather outlook, so I want to give them credit. 13-14, it was unbelievably cold. It was really bitterly cold here in Philadelphia and all up and down the East Coast. It was very, very snowy. We had 68 inches of snow in Philadelphia. That's a tremendous amount when you consider our average is 22.4. So that's a lot of snow. 95-96, you might remember that one with the blizzard of 96 when we had 65.5 inches of snow for the winter. So 30 of those inches came from one storm. But if you cancel that storm out, it still would be a very snowy winter because that would leave us with about 35 inches of snow left. So that was a very, very cold and snowy winter. Here's another one, 02-03. We had the President's Day 2 storm there. There was there were parts of that winter that were warmer. It alternated with bitter cold, but it was really, really cold when we did experience the Arctic outbreak. So that year, a lot of snow again, 46.3 inches. 19 of those came during that President's Day storm. One thing with that President's Day storm, that number of inches would have been much higher. We did have a few hours where we went over to very heavy sleet, and that cut down the snow totals dramatically. So that could have been well into the 20s if that didn't happen. 94, 95, you might remember that one for all of the very, very cold air that we had in a ton of very small storms. We had snow clippers come down and drop 2, 3, 4 inches of snow. It seemed like almost every day. We had 2 tremendous ice storms that really crippled the area. So that's another thing to look at for this winter. And then 79, 80, I was a little bit too young to remember this one. What I can tell from it, from the research I did, it was very cold, but not a lot of snow. Only 9.8 inches, which is well under average. So that kind of gives you a little bit of pause, and you wonder, you know, if could we be that low? I don't see it this winter, though. So those are the analogs to try to figure out what's going on for this year. Other opinions. This is what people are saying. So the National Weather Service, they're saying a warm winter and average snowfall. They put this out a long time ago. There's a reason why I wait till the end of November, because you want to see how the teleconnections are going to unfold and their trends before you put out a winter weather outlook. And they did theirs pretty early. So, you know, they're the National Weather Service. That you certainly can't dismiss them, but I'm not sure about that warmer and average snow. AccuWeather, they say it's going to be a cold winter and above average snow. Okay. Hurricane Schwartz on NBC 10. He's going with a cold winter and above average snow. But look at the snow totals he's putting in there. 30 to 40. And he believes that that might even be conservative. 30 to 40. That's when you hear Hurricane Schwartz put out large snow totals like that. He doesn't do that unless he's pretty sure. He's not a hype artist. He doesn't try to hype the storms and doesn't try to hype the winter. He tries to keep it within reason. And if he's saying 30 to 40, that should really raise some eyebrows. Cecily Tynan, WPVI, again, cold winter, above average snow. 28 to 36 inches, so in and around what Hurricane Schwartz is saying. They don't have a plus in there, so they didn't mention anything. She didn't mention anything about being conservative, so I think that's really where they're staying. Fox 29, you guessed it, cold winter, above average snow. Again, close to the others, 25 to 33 inches for Philadelphia. So those are the 5 that I put in this presentation. I've looked at other ones too, probably 20 of them, maybe even more. And I think it's a good idea to see where everybody's thinking. And right now, the consensus definitely is cold winter and above average snow. So I'm not going to argue with that. Average snow in Philadelphia, 22.4. So we should eclipse that probably pretty easily. Okay. Snow amounts and temps. This is what you waited for, right? Let's see what happens in December. So December, I'm calling for 4 to 8 inches of snow. Probably a storm early in December and possibly one around Christmas time, Christmas week. The December is going to start out pretty cold. There should be a bit of a warm up, probably in the maybe the December 10th area, 12th, somewhere around there. And then we should reload, go back into a colder than average pattern, and then have another storm there. So 4 to 8 inches of snow in December. I do think there's a really good chance that we, well, let me say it this way. There's a better than average chance that we could have a white Christmas. I'm not going to say it's a good chance because it's very rare around our area in Philadelphia to have a white Christmas. Doesn't happen often. So if the percentages are 20% in a normal year or 15% in a normal year, I would say it's probably 40-45% this year. So still less than average, less than 50-50, but better than the normal average. The temperatures, again, they're going to fluctuate, so we'll average out about a degree below normal for December. Then we go into January. January could be a big month. Snow, I'm calling for 8 to 12 inches of snow in January. We got to be on the lookout this year with all these teleconnections pointing to cold and snow, especially with a very juiced up subtropical jet. We probably will get a large snowstorm. It could be in January. It might be 12 plus. Who knows? You can't predict a storm like that with any certainty from a week out, let alone months out, but it's possible. There should be some smaller clipper events that will drop a few inches of snow. Clipper events usually drop about an inch or two, sometimes 3, 4, 5 inches, but that's about it. So they're not going to be blockbusters, but certainly can make things a little bit slick. We got to be on the lookout for ice storms. In this pattern, we could have warming in the upper atmospheres, but cold locked in like we just did. We saw that on November 15th, where we had a very cold surface and we had warm air aloft, and that leads to ice storms. So we got to be on the lookout for that. It's going to be very, very cold as far as temperatures go. Bitterly cold when the Arctic air comes pressing in. It will moderate at times. We probably will have part of January where temperatures soar a little bit, probably get in the 50s for a couple of days, but then it will reload, I think, and become cold. So we're going to average even colder, 2 degrees below normal for January. Let's take a look at February. This could be the real big month. I'm calling for 10 to 20 inches of snow in February. Again, who knows if we're going to get a large one, 12 plus. We have a much better shot at it this year than we do in a normal year, so I have to put that in there. We will probably have one large snowstorm, at least 8 inches. When I say large, that's what I'm driving at, 8 inches plus. And then we'll have to be on the lookout to see if we get something bigger. And then 2 medium-sized snowstorms, maybe 3 to 6, 4 to 8. February, we got to be on the lookout again for possible ice storms. The temperatures in February, very, very cold, very few days of warmth. We're going to average 3 degrees below normal in February. And then finally, March. Let's take a look at what that is going to look like. Again, a pretty snowy March this year, just like last year. 8 to 12 inches of snow. March, you still got to be on the lookout for 12 plus, although it becomes less likely because there should be in March mixed precipitation. It's very hard the later you get in March to stay all snow. So 12 plus is going to be harder, but still possible. Look for some mixed events there: rain, sleet, snow, possible ice storm. It's going to be cold, not as cold as February. It's going to be 1 degree below average for March. Here are the snow totals for this year. Let's take a look at Philadelphia and South Jersey, the interior part of South Jersey. It's a lot. I'm going with 30 to 52. Storm track is going to be a big part of this. Storms that track inland, of course, you probably know that puts us on the warm sector, so we would see rain and maybe some mixed precipitation going to rain. If the storm track is slightly off the coast, again, we'd have to fight that rain-snow line. If it's a little bit further east, then we might be in position to stay all snow. So when all is said and done, I think we're going to have a very healthy snow amount of 30 to 52 inches. Next are the northwest suburbs. I'm going with 36 to 52 inches. You might be thinking, well, wouldn't the northwest suburbs have a higher end than 52? Why would it be the same as Philadelphia? Well, I think what's going to happen is there are going to be some storms that are just far enough off the coast to keep us all snow in the Philadelphia area, but too far east for the northwest suburbs to get clobbered. So they'll get some snow out of those storms, but it could be a situation where the Philadelphia area, the I-95 corridor, sees, let's say, 12 inches of snow, and the northwest suburbs see 3 or 4. Because they're on the back edge of that precipitation field. On the other side of it, maybe towards February, late February and early March, there could be storms that track a little bit closer to the coast, where Philadelphia and interior New Jersey, they turn over to sleet and freezing rain, and the northwest suburbs are all snow. So that could average things out. So they should be pretty uniform, I think, for Philadelphia and the northwest suburbs. Now, coastal New Jersey and Delaware, this is a lot of snow for these areas, well above average, 25 inches to 40 inches of snow in those areas. It's going to depend a little bit on storm track, but also the water temperature off of the Atlantic coast. If the ocean water temperature gets down to about 35 degrees or lower, then the chances for snow along the coast go way up, because it's more difficult for the storm to change over from frozen precipitation to liquid. So ocean water temperature is going to have a lot to do with it, along with storm track, but I think they're pretty safe at 25 to 40 inches. If the ocean water drops closer to 40, if it doesn't drop enough, then we'll keep it at 25. And then the Poconos, if you're a snow lover, that's where you would want to be this winter. Tremendous amounts of snow, 70 to 90 inches of snow in the Poconos. Their average is about, I want to say, about 45 or 50, depends on where you are in the Poconos. So 70 to 90 is way above average. I think the Arctic intrusions are really going to be big there. There are going to be a lot of clippers coming down that are going to drop 3, 4, even up to 7 inches of snow in the Poconos, and that could happen twice in a week. They're also going to be involved in coastal storms that are strong enough and big enough to push the precipitation field all the way to that area from the coast. So that's going to be a big area of snow this winter. So if you're a skier, you're going to have a smile on your face. It's going to make you happy. So I hope you enjoyed the slideshow presentation. Took a little while to get it done. I apologize for how long it took, but I hope you enjoy it, and whatever you do, stay safe in this stuff. And as usual, I'll keep tracking storms as they come along. Thanks for your time, everybody, and thanks for all of your support. Take care.